Welcome back. We're discussing the upsurge in violence in Congo and the way it's targeting women and girls in particular. With us is playwright and activist Eve Ensler, who's traveled the world to support women who've lived through unimaginable horror in war-torn regions. And she's joining us from today from New Orleans in Louisiana. We've got Juliana on the line from Paris with a question. Juliana, what would you like to ask?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Khan. Thank you for asking me on. What I want to ask is, I believe that this war in DRC has basically been perpetually taking place because of political interests that are being harnessed around there. So, I mean, in terms of deploying troops to go and look after people, what is being done politically to see that, and because of I think it's the minerals, the gold and the diamonds that are there that are basically the center of focus, and all this raping and clashing is just to cover up that situation.
Okay.
So what is
Juliana, let me ask you, Eve, that do you have to get involved in the politics in any way in order to be effective with your campaign? How much are those political issues that Juliana is mentioning?
I think we do. I mean, I think the resources are, this is obviously an economic war, and so much of what is going on in the DRC is the fight over the war. I think if you look at Okunda and you look at Kabila, they have militias who are being controlled by outside forces that are benefiting the West, because the distribution of these resources, whether it's coltan, which goes for our cell phones, or tin, or copper, or gold, the Congo is the richest country in Africa, and it is being pillaged and plundered by outside interests, by militias, by the government, and none of those resources are going to the people. As a matter of fact, if you look at most of the mines and where most of the raping occurs, it's always around where the mines are.
Okay. We had an email that came in from Lorraine in the UK who says, the world is not doing enough for Congo. Everyone's concerned with money, mortgages, our economic crisis, quotes, etc. We're fortunate to be able to have an economic crisis and not rape, war and slavery. Eve Ensler, go for it. Go for it. Say it like it is. And it makes me wonder, what do you feel, or how do you assess what the international community is doing in this conflict?
Well, I'm very disappointed by it. I feel that it's been 10 years now this war has been raging. Why have we allowed it to get to the point where 5 million people have died and hundreds of thousands of women have been raped? And why aren't women a priority for us anywhere in the world, really? I think right now there is some interest in the European countries, but it's very sluggish. It's not directed. I think more importantly, we as a world have the responsibility to protect. That's a UN doctrine. When governments are failing or when governments are hurting their own people, we as a world have to create the mechanisms to protect people and intervene on their behalf without becoming another form of colonialists. And I think right now, I believe that this campaign, look, it's certainly on the front news, which it wasn't, on front page news, which it wasn't a year ago. We know that women across the planet are joining the V-Day UNICEF campaign, which is connected to many, many other groups around the world. And what we're hoping is that within the next year, we can build a real national, local, and international movement of women and men to stand up for the women and people of Congo and demand that the resources be theirs, that their country be theirs, that the fighting stops so that they can rebuild their country and put leaders in place who actually have their interest at stake.
All right. We're getting lots of comments and questions up from our chat room and live station, which is taking place. Thanks to everyone who's in there. We have on the line from Norway, ABDI, with a question. ABDI, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, hi, Riz.
Hi.
I want to ask your guest why just only we focusing about Congo's rape. What's going on reality? We don't see when the country is one of the richest in mineral resources and one of the largest country in Africa. So we don't see full coverage. Why we don't?
Okay, that's actually an interesting point, Eve. That it's true. Congo, what's happening in Congo has been overshadowed by many things, apart from the election which just took place in America, which obviously had world headlines. Other issues, the economic crisis, financial crisis. How hard is it for you to find space in the media for your cause and the cause of the women of Congo, for example, when you're battling these kinds of things?
Well, I have to say, in all fairness, in the last month in the New York Times, the Congo's been on the front page twice, and yesterday the situation of the resources was front page news. So that's a beginning change, and we have seen it on CNN, and you're covering it, and I think there is more coverage. I think the linkages between the economic pillaging and the economic war, which it really is, and the raping and the murdering and the killings has to be made more clear in the media. And I think much more attention must be spent on that so that we understand that this is an economic war. But I also want to say that I think we really need to look at what is happening to women in the Congo. And people want to sidestep that issue and always make it the issue we get to later. Women hold the Congo literally on their backs. They are the primary workers, they are the providers, they keep families together. If we see the destruction of women's bodies, of their vaginas, of their genitals, of their reproductive organs, we know that the future of the Congo is definitely jeopardized. And I want to say that I think in a way the country of the Congo is like a woman, is like a gorgeous, fertile, productive resource that the world is essentially plundering. And if we don't honor it the way we honor women's bodies, they both go together.
We had an email that came in from a regular viewer, Barb Sonia in Missouri here in the US. Barb, thanks for this from email. It says, the world has stood by and let the genocide happen in Rwanda and the violence in the Congo, not just against women, but against the people as a nation. If it's allowed to continue, what other nation will be next? And I wonder how important it is, from what you've seen, for the international community, the African community, to send out a message that this won't be tolerated. Otherwise, it could spread again into rope in other countries around in the region.
I think it's absolutely crucial. I think it's absolutely crucial for African nations to get involved and to support and protect the people of Congo. I think if we don't stop what is happening in the Congo, and if we don't honor the people of the Congo, and if we don't fight to set up mechanisms where they own their own resources and where they're protected and where they can live lives of peace, this will absolutely spread. Already we're seeing the beginning of a potential civil war around the Congo. Angolese troops are getting involved. Troops are coming from other countries. We have to say that these kind of conflicts are where people are suffering the most. And if we, and we as a world must intervene.
Rosie's on the line from Italy. Good to hear from Italy. Go ahead, Rosie.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, my name is Rosie. Yes, I'd like to know who are those behind the supply of the guns to the militia?
Have you been able to establish, Eve? I mean, obviously you're there with a particular campaign, but again, the military and the arms are getting in there. Are you having to deal with the consequences of the amount of military armament being supplied?
Well, I mean, it is suspected and it's pretty well known at this point that Rwanda is supporting Akunda and that Kabila is supporting the FDLR. And that these two outside, and then who is supporting Kagame? The West, the British, and the United States are supporting Kagame. And I think that the change just goes on and on. China has huge interest in the DRC right now. Germany has huge interest in the DRC right now. The United States, the British, the French. All of these countries are benefiting from what goes on in those mines. And I think if we put pressure on both Kabila and Kagame to stop supplying and to stop supporting the militias on the ground, and if there is and if these people who are essentially war criminals, I mean, Nkunda is up for war crimes. The FDLR are known genocidists. All of these people should be in prisons and should be held accountable for war crimes. And yet we're treating them like leaders that we negotiate with, and we're treating them as if there are people who should be directing the future of the country when they're responsible for rapings and murders and the systematic destruction of villages and displacing hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, you've described some of the adverse implications of surrounding countries, the adverse involvement of some of the other African nations, but what are African countries in general trying to do to try to resolve this? What positive signs are there that as a continent, and certainly as a region in Central Africa, that there is some effort to try to resolve this?
Well, I saw this week that they did send envoys from Africa to speak with Nkunda and to try to negotiate with him. But I think, frankly, African peacekeepers and African countries who don't have vested interests in the DRC should be sending peacekeepers and should be sending support to protect the people. I actually think that is the best place that it could be coming from, Africa supporting itself. And what I really believe is that the people of the DRC must determine the direction of their country. For so many years, we have seen colonial interests determining everything. And I, having been there now quite a few times in the last 2 years, people are ready to take back their country. There is a huge movement of people, a peace movement of people who want the rapes and who want the violence to end, who want to construct educational programs, who want to construct healthcare programs, who want to build centers to empower women and shift the culture. And if the violence ends, all that is possible.
Interestingly enough, an email, you mentioned some of those things about the connections between what's going on and the sort of colonial past. Bruno Drusky, a regular viewer from Paris in France, wrote in saying, don't you think such expressions such as femicide or genocide or tribal wars are just used to make the Africans look like barbarians and give Western opinion the impression that conflicts in Congo are irrational and not linked with neo-colonial policies? Is it a mask?
Well, first of all, what I want to say is that when I talk about femicide, I'm talking about a global policy. I think that femicide is a systematic strategy to destroy women around the planet, and it serves kind of to keep patriarchy in place. And I think the DRC is the extreme version of femicide. I don't think it's particular to Africa or any country. I think it's universal. But I will say that I think it's very important that we look at the destruction of women in the DRC, not as something that's particularly African. I would actually say, and this was very interesting at our public testimonials, many men came out to support and feel the horror of what's happened to women. There are very few men in the Congo actually committing the atrocities. There are a few thousand compared to the millions of people who live there. This is not an African thing. This is a militia thing. This is a war thing. And I think we can't deny that there is femicide there. At the same time, I don't want to demonize Africans and make them the people who are only people on the planet committing femicide when we know that isn't true.
Eve, with just a minute to go, I want to ask you what role you might think there might be for the International Criminal Court in dealing with this. I mean, in the past there was some effort to demand justice for what happened in Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia, where mass rape and sexual violence was used as and sexual slavery used as a tool in war. Is there any hope of taking this to the courts and making it something that people will know is on the cards, if as a weapon?
I think it's essential that the ICC begins to arrest and prosecute war criminals in the DRC, and particularly the ones committing sexual atrocities. And I think as soon as that begins to happen, it will signal that there is law and that there is a boundary and that people can't just do these acts randomly and in such huge numbers. And I think until there is an end to impunity, these crimes will spread and continue. So I think the ICC must involve itself immediately and directly.
Eve Ensler, thank you very much for talking with us. Safe travels.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. On the next show, we speak with Andrew Basovich, whose latest book, The Limits of Power, The End of America's Exceptionalism, is now a New York Times bestseller. He argues America should focus on its internal conflicts before getting involved in conflicts abroad. You can catch us all next week, too, in Mumbai, India's commercial capital, looking at what's in store for the country as it rises to the status of economic superpower. We'll be coming to you at a special time all next week, 1400 hours GMT. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.